The party continued around me, but I felt like an outsider in my own family. The festive chatter, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the twinkling lights all blurred together as my mind raced. I couldn't stop staring at my sister's kids, laughing, playing, completely comfortable in the house where my son had been so easily cast aside. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palm. My mother's words echoed in my mind. It's not personal. It felt personal. Michael's hand rested lightly on my lower back, a silent plea for me to let it go. I wanted to push it away, to shake off the pitiful attempt at comfort, but I forced myself to stay composed. This wasn't the place to lose my temper. Still, my mind wouldn't rest. Something wasn't adding up. I stepped away from the crowd and made my way to the kitchen, needing a moment to breathe. I poured myself a glass of wine, gripping the stem tightly, when I heard footsteps behind me. Emma, Grace's voice rang out, light and airy as if she had no idea why I might be upset. Enjoying the party, I turned slowly, taking in the sight of my sister in her perfectly tailored red dress, her hair styled in soft waves, her lips painted the same deep crimson as the wine in my glass. She looked smug. "Why are your kids here?" I asked bluntly, skipping any polite pleasantries. She blinked in feigned surprise. "Mom said it was fine." "I assumed you knew." I scoffed. "She told me no kids were allowed." Grace's lips pressed together in a thin smile. "Oh, well, I guess she changed her mind." Liar. I could see it all over her face. She wasn't even trying to hide it. A knot formed in my stomach as realization sank in. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. But why? I studied her carefully, and that's when I saw it. The subtle way she glanced over my shoulder. The way her lips curved slightly, as if she was in on some private joke. I turned my head just enough to follow her gaze, right to Michael. He stood across the room, talking with my father, but his posture was stiff, and every few seconds, he glanced toward us. He wasn't just looking at me. He was looking at her. A chill ran down my spine. No, it couldn't be. Grace had always been the golden child, the one who got away with everything. I had spent my whole life in her shadow, watching as she was adored by everyone, including our parents. If she broke the rules, they bent them for her. If she made a mistake, they fixed it. But this? No. She wouldn't. Would she? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. You and Michael seem close. Grace's lips twitched, as if fighting the urge to smile. Oh, well, we've always gotten along, haven't we? Her words were laced with something I couldn't quite name. Amusement? Satisfaction? I opened my mouth to say something. Anything. But before I could, my mother's voice rang out from the other room. Everyone, gather around. It's time for presents. The conversation was cut short as guests moved toward the Christmas tree. Grace gave me one last glance, her expression unreadable, before slipping away into the crowd. My legs felt like lead as I followed, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Presents were exchanged, laughter filled the air, and yet, all I could focus on was the sickening feeling twisting in my gut. I watched Michael as he unwrapped a gift from my parents, a sleek new watch. He smiled, thanked them, but his eyes kept darting toward Grace. I felt like a fool. For months, Michael had been acting distant. I had chalked it up to work stress, to exhaustion, to anything but the possibility of something worse, but now, as I stood there in the middle of my childhood home, watching the way my husband and sister moved around each other like a silent dance, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I needed proof. I pulled my phone from my clutch, my hands trembling as I opened our phone records. My stomach dropped. Dozens of calls. Hundreds of texts. All between Michael and Grace. My breath hitched. I clicked on one of the messages, my fingers ice cold. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible. I hate sneaking around, but it's worth it. The walls around me closed in. The room blurred. Michael and Grace. My husband and my sister. I had been betrayed in the worst possible way. And they had done it right under my nose. The wine glass in my hand trembled, and for a brief moment, I considered throwing it, smashing it, causing a scene right there, in front of everyone. But no, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching me break. I took a slow breath, steadied my shaking hands, and slid my phone back into my purse. If they thought they could make a fool out of me and get away with it, they were dead wrong. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to destroy them. The Christmas party was still in full swing, laughter echoing through the grand living room as family members exchanged gifts and reminisced about old memories. But I wasn't there anymore, not really. My body sat stiffly in the armchair near the tree, my hands clenched so tightly that my nails bit into my palms. My mind, however, was in a completely different place. A place filled with betrayal, rage, and the undeniable truth that my husband and sister had been sneaking around behind my back. The messages on my phone were like a cruel slap to the face. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. How many times had he lied to me? How many times had they shared secret glances right under my nose? And worst of all, how long had my family known? I lifted my gaze and found my mother watching me carefully from across the room. It hit me like a freight train. She knew.
Of course she did.
My mother had always favored Grace, always excused her selfishness, always defended her when she did something wrong. But this was a new low, even for her. I swallowed down the bile rising in my throat. This wasn't the time to lose control, not yet. I needed to be smart about this. I turned my attention to Michael and Grace, who were seated way too close to each other on the couch, their bodies angled slightly inward as they whispered something to each other. My stomach churned. He wasn't even trying to hide it. The warmth in his eyes, the way his lips twitched in amusement, the casual way he leaned toward her, it was all there. And I had been blind. The realization hit me like a wave, knocking the breath out of my lungs. While I had been busy taking care of our son, while I had been trusting him, while I had been faithful, he had been here, with her. I forced myself to breathe, my heart hammering in my chest. I wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of them.
No.
They didn't deserve my tears. Instead, I carefully placed my wine glass on the side table, smoothing out the fabric of my dress as I stood up. Every muscle in my body screamed for me to lash out, to rip their perfect little world apart the way they had done to mine. But I had a better idea. If they wanted to play games, I would beat them at their own. I walked toward the middle of the room, my heels clicking softly against the polished hardwood floor. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice loud enough to carry over the chatter. The room quieted as all eyes turned to me. Grace frowned slightly. Michael stiffened. "Since we're all gathered here as a family tonight," I continued, forcing a smile, "I thought this would be the perfect time to give out a very special gift." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My fingers were steady now, my resolve unshaken. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Emma, maybe we should." "Oh no, darling," I cut him off sweetly. "This is important. I want everyone to hear this." I tapped the screen and held up the phone, my voice dripping with faux excitement. "Let's take a little trip down memory lane, shall we?" The text messages appeared on the large screen of the TV behind me, thanks to the Bluetooth connection I had discreetly activated earlier. One by one, the damning messages between Michael and Grace lit up the screen. Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." My father stood abruptly, his face paling. Grace's kids sat wide-eyed, looking up at their mother in confusion. But my mother? She just sighed like she had expected this. Like she was annoyed that I was making a scene. Michael jumped to his feet, his face drained of all color. "Emma, I can explain." I turned to him, tilting my head. "Oh,
please."
"I'd love to hear it. Would you like to start with last night was incredible or I hate sneaking around, but it's worth it?" Grace shot up from the couch, her face flushed with humiliation. "Emma, please, not here." "Oh, not here?" I let out a sharp laugh. "But here is exactly where you did it, isn't it? While I was at home with my son, our son, taking care of everything, you were sneaking around behind my back, weren't you?" Michael ran a hand through his hair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Grace looked down at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. Silence. No excuses. No apologies. Nothing. And that told me everything I needed to know. I turned to my parents, my voice filled with venom. And you, did you know? Did you let this happen under your roofs? My father looked away, his expression tight. My mother simply folded her arms and said, Emma, let's not make a big deal out of this. It's the holidays. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, of course. The holidays, we wouldn't want to ruin your perfect Christmas, would we? I turned to Grace, my heart pounding in my chest. I hope it was worth it, I whispered. Her eyes finally met mine, and for the first time, I saw something resembling regret flicker across her face. But I didn't care. It was too late. I grabbed my coat, slinging it over my shoulders, and walked toward the door. Michael tried to reach for my arm, but I jerked away. Emma, please. We can talk about this. I turned back, my voice cold and unwavering.
No, Michael.
We're done. And with that, I walked out the door, leaving behind the family that had betrayed me, the husband who had destroyed my trust, and the sister who had ripped my heart apart. They thought they had won. But the real game was just beginning. The cold night air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside, my breath visible in the frigid air. I didn't feel it though. I was too numb, too furious, too broken to care. My hands trembled as I gripped the keys in my purse, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Michael and Grace, my husband and my sister. The ultimate betrayal, served to me like a poisoned Christmas dinner, with my own family sitting complicit at the table. I reached my car and leaned against it, sucking in deep breaths to steady myself. Tears threatened to spill, but I refused to cry. Not for them. Not for this. I had wasted enough love, enough loyalty, enough years on people who didn't deserve it. I needed to think. I needed to act. And most importantly, I needed revenge. I wasn't going to let them walk away from this unscathed. Pulling out my phone, I scrolled through the contacts and found my lawyer's number. It was late, but I didn't care. I needed to get the ball rolling on my divorce tonight. The phone rang twice before a groggy voice answered. Emma, everything okay? I took a steady breath.
No.
But it will be. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to a hotel and checked myself in. I sat in the quiet of the unfamiliar room, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I didn't even recognize myself. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same person who had walked into that Christmas party just hours ago. She was stronger. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. There was no sadness, no doubt, only purpose. I had spent years being the devoted wife, the doting mother, the loyal daughter. I had bent over backward to make everyone else happy, and where had it gotten me? Tossed aside like I was nothing. Not anymore. I called a babysitter to watch Ethan for the morning, and then went straight to the bank. The moment I stepped inside, I withdrew half of the funds from our joint account and moved them into a separate one under my name. I had no doubt Michael would try to sweet-talk his way out of this, but he wasn't getting another dime from me. Then I went home. The second I stepped into our house, the scent of Christmas still lingering in the air, I felt a fresh wave of fury wash over me. This was the home we had built together, the place where we had shared so many supposed happy memories. And yet, all of it was a lie. Michael was sitting on the couch when I walked in, his head snapping up in shock. Emma, thank God. I was so worried. Look, I know you're upset, but please, let's talk. I dropped my bag onto the table and folded my arms. Talk. Oh, now you want to talk. He stood up, running a hand through his hair. I made a mistake, okay? I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. I let out a sharp laugh. It just happened? You don't accidentally cheat on your wife with her own sister, Michael. His face twisted in frustration. It wasn't like that. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the banking app, turning the screen toward him. His eyes widened as he saw the missing money. I already spoke to a lawyer, I said coolly. I'm filing for divorce. You'll be hearing from them soon. his face drained of color. Emma, wait. Wait for what? I snapped. For you to explain? To try to manipulate me into staying? To tell me it didn't mean anything? He took a step toward me, but I held up a hand. I loved you, Michael. I trusted you. I built a life with you. My voice cracked, but I steadied myself. But I will not be made a fool of. You and Grace deserve each other. And you know what? You deserve Mom and Dad, too. Because I want nothing to do with any of you. His expression wavered, as if reality was finally hitting him. But what about Ethan? A pang hit my heart, but I stood firm. Ethan is my priority. I'll be talking to my lawyer about custody, too. And trust me, you're going to have to fight hard if you ever want to see him again. Michael looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew me well enough to see that I was dead serious. I grabbed a suitcase from the hall closet and started packing. I didn't even care where I was going. I just needed to go, to start over, to leave this mess behind. And then, as I zipped up my bag, I turned back to Michael one last time. Oh, I said, tilting my head. One more thing. He looked at me cautiously.
What?
I pulled out my phone and smirked. I sent screenshots of your messages to Grace's husband. His face crumbled. And that was the moment I knew I'd won. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. 3 months later, my life was completely different. The divorce was underway. Michael was miserable and fighting for scraps. Grace's husband had obliterated her in the divorce, leaving her with nothing. My parents had tried to reach out, but I ignored every call, every message. I had built a new life for myself and Ethan, one that wasn't filled with lies and betrayal. And as I sat in my new apartment, sipping coffee while my son played with his toys, I realized something. This Christmas had started as a nightmare. But in the end, it was the best gift I had ever received. Christmas had always been my favorite time of year. The warmth of twinkling lights, the scent of cinnamon and pine, and the laughter of family gathered around the fireplace. It was the kind of magic that made all the stress of the year fade away. But this year, that magic was tainted with a bitterness I never saw coming. My parents had called a week before Christmas with an invitation to their annual holiday party. It was the same every year, fancy, elegant, and filled with extended family and close friends. The only difference this time? They made it clear that children were not welcome. Darling, we just want an adults-only gathering this time, my mother had said over the phone, her voice coated in that sweet, condescending tone she used whenever she was about to say something offensive. You understand, right? It's just for one evening. I hesitated, gripping the phone tightly. But Mom, Ethan's only 5. It's Christmas. He should be with family. She sighed dramatically. It's just not the right environment for kids. We want to enjoy some sophisticated adult conversation without little ones running around. You can bring Michael, of course. Michael, my husband. The man I loved and trusted. The man who had always been my rock. At least I thought he was. Still, I tried to reason with her. But Ethan loves Christmas. He was looking forward to spending time with everyone. Are you sure? Emma, she cut me off sharply. Let's not make this a big deal. You can spend Christmas morning with him, and then leave him with a sitter for the party. I swallowed my frustration and agreed, feeling the sting of rejection not just for me, but for my son. I didn't want to make a scene, but it felt wrong. Something about the way she dismissed me so easily made my stomach churn. The week leading up to the party was filled with mixed emotions. I tried to focus on making Christmas special for Ethan, decorating our tree, baking cookies, and watching holiday movies together. But every time I thought about my parents' decision, anger flared up inside me. My mother had never been the warmest person, but to exclude her own grandson from a family gathering? It didn't sit right with me. Michael, on the other hand, didn't seem bothered. It's just one night, he kept saying. Let's just enjoy the party and not dwell on it. I wanted to believe he was right. I wanted to enjoy the evening, to let go of my frustration. But the nagging feeling in my gut refused to go away. The night of the party arrived, and Michael and I got ready in silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the way Michael had been distant lately, always glued to his phone, or how he had stopped looking at me the way he used to. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, but deep down, my instincts were screaming at me. Still, I forced a smile, determined not to let my worries ruin the evening. We arrived at my parents' house, a grand estate decorated with sparkling white lights and a massive Christmas tree visible through the bay windows. As we stepped inside, the warmth of the fireplace and the hum of holiday music filled the air. I greeted my parents, plastering on a smile, though I was still hurt by their decision to exclude Ethan. But as I glanced around the room, my heart nearly stopped. Sitting near the tree, unwrapping presents, were my sister's 3 children. My breath caught in my throat. My niece and nephews, all under the age of 10, laughing and playing like they belonged there. I turned to my mother, my voice shaking. I thought this was an adults-only party. She had the audacity to look surprised. Oh well, Grace insisted on bringing them. And you know how difficult it is to say no to her. Difficult to say no to her? But not to me? Anger burned in my chest. So, it's just my son who's not welcome? She placed a hand on my arm, her face softening as if I were the unreasonable one. Emma, please don't ruin Christmas. It's not personal, but it was. It was very personal. I felt Michael's hand on my back, a silent attempt to calm me down. I pulled away. Something wasn't right. And then, I noticed how my sister, Grace, kept glancing at Michael. The way her smile lingered a little too long when she spoke to him. The way he avoided my gaze. A chill ran through me. And that was the moment I knew.